All right, Mark. Oomame.
Yes. Good
I
morning.
love it. I'm a big fan now. So I got the jars going in my kitchen, and the whole thing. I put it in all kinds of stuff, and I think you should revive. Remember that there was a commercial in like the '80s, like wasabi, and the guys, that could be your commercial. You can do
it could be.
oomame.
That's right.
Okay, so we'll get into oomame and what it is and the product, all the exciting stuff. But let's go back a little bit. I want to tell your backstory. How you got started, your background in business, and how you kind of work your way in. Because it's a good story as to how you got into doing what you're doing now.
Sure. I've heard some of your podcasts before. Sometimes people go really far back. I don't think I need to go that far back.
No,
but
you don't got to go back to the log cabin.
No, that's right. But I think there's a relevant starting place, which was when I was a senior in college. I was looking at China thinking, oh my God, 1 billion people. Now, this was 1988, so a long time ago.
There's a few more billion now, right?
There's a few more billion. And, I was probably ahead of myself, but I thought 1 billion people, I want to sort of go there. But when I graduated college, I had no money. So I worked, saved some money, and then I moved to Taiwan where I studied Chinese.
Okay.
And after 3 years, I left, and my family thought I'd be home in 2 weeks. After 3 years, I came home, and then I went to graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania, where I got both an MBA from Wharton, and then they also had a program where I got a master's in Chinese from the University of Pennsylvania. And really, that speaks to my love of foreign places, doing something different and being a pioneer, because there weren't a lot of white Jewish guys from New Jersey living in the small village that I resided in Taiwan.
Right.
And I really developed a sense of appreciation for other cultures, for how people do things, and then food. Food's my love language. And in China, the Chinese love food as well. It's all about bringing people together in family. And I spent a lot of time going to the night markets, eating at all of the different.
So did you learn to speak? What is it? What do they speak of?
Mandarin there.
Yeah. So you speak Mandarin fluently?
So I speak Mandarin fluently.
Wow,
and my first 5 words were Niuro, Juro, Jiro, Yu, Cai, which is beef, chicken, pork, fish, and vegetable, because I would go to these restaurants and I'd point to something, and if it wasn't one of those 5 things, I'd be like, I'm moving on. And it turned out like I would say that and it would be tofu, and since it wasn't one of those, tofu wasn't one of my first 5 words.
Those are your words.
Exactly. Or they would misunderstand. They give foreigners the benefit of the doubt when speaking, but so eating was the hardest thing. If you looked at a picture of me, I was like skinny as can be.
Yeah,
I lost a fair amount of weight in the beginning. So
yeah, I'm sure.
So I have this love of food and celebrating other cultures. I spent a lot of time at like tiny restaurants in this village that I lived in, learning what they cooked with, and that was really where a lot of this began. They like spicy food. How
did you end up in such a small Taiwanese village as opposed to like a large city?
So that's a great question.
Yeah.
When I was a senior at the University of Massachusetts.
So you said 1988, right? So I'm still in college at this point. I'm like a junior.
Right. Okay. So my senior year in college, last semester, I took Chinese thinking, well, let me at least give it a try. So it was a non-intensive class. I got an A. My professor happened to be from Taiwan, from this small college in this village. And he would come over because they had an exchange program once every 5 years. And this was his once every 5 years. And he said, when you're ready, let me know. So 2 years later, after I saved money, I called him. I said, I'm ready. And he welcomed me into they had a Chinese language center for foreigners. They brought, people came in from around the world. There were Germans, people from Korea. Right. And so I moved there, and that made it somewhat easy. And I
so it was
there
because of the professor, his connection.
Yes, I would have never found this place.
So it was like Mandarin as a second language. They were all teaching everybody.
Well, and it's interesting in Taiwan, Taiwanese was pretty strong back then, and it's a very different language. Completely different. So there's you can't even hear the difference. Now they read the same characters, but it's a completely different language.
But is it like some of the? I know some of the other Asian dialects, like they can't even communicate.
No, they can't.
So it's the same thing, Taiwanese to Mandarin. It's like they don't even know what they're talking about.
Right. So to ask how something weighs in Taiwanese, you say "jikin waze." Right. And if you were to say it in Mandarin, you say ""jiga dong duo shao."
Not even close.
Not even close. Like completely different. Now you could write it if you were literate, and the writing is completely the same.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
I know the dialect. So, are Asian dialects like Mandarin? are they more difficult than English or less difficult than English? Some of these structured languages I know are less difficult.
I think I had trouble learning Romance languages. So like with French, you have to conjugate a verb 5 ways.
Spanish, French.
That blew my mind. And then everything was backwards.
Yeah.
Right. You know, the way you switch your sentence around. In Chinese, the sentence structure is similar. And I found it, and it was something I really wanted to do. So I found it a little easier than most people, but I worked hard at it.
Because now you're seeing Mandarin programs in most of the public schools and high school and stuff like that.
We have one. All three of my kids. Yeah, all three of my kids studied from 7th grade on. You know, they were able to, from middle school, they were able to, the 6th grade, they were able to take Mandarin. So all three of my kids.
It helps to have a dad you can ask questions to. I couldn't help them, so.
It was. Did your kids study Chinese?
No, they studied, well, I think my son studied French. I never took French. My daughter's studying Spanish. My other daughter studied Spanish. I know a little bit of Spanish. In high school I could speak, but not anymore. But forget Mandarin, Asian language, forget it. No way.
Yeah. So, you know, but it was fascinating because when I moved to Taiwan, when we study here in America, I knew nothing about Chinese history. Nothing. I mean, they don't even, they scratch
we don't really touch that stuff. Yeah.
No, when I got there, I was like, oh my God, there's 5,000 years of history. And the Chinese were the first to build bridges and the compass and gunpowder and map the human body and map the stars. Like they were the center of the universe up until 500 years ago.
I think explorers would go there and bring things back, right? They would find things.
The spices. And it was pretty amazing. And they will, you know, I was about a decade early, which is okay. But doing what I did, but they will be the center of the world again economically. It's amazing what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean,
they don't lay copper wire, you know, when I was there, they're not even putting copper wire in for phones. They went right to wireless. And so I don't know if you saw, but Alibaba just created their own chips for all their cloud computing. So they're really leapfrogging everything. Yeah. And because of the way their government is structured, you know, they have the capability to make the investments, and they're really educating their people, highly educated, and they're actually getting creative. They
kind of have one team you're playing on because they're communists, so they kind of control. It's like controlled capitalism. They get to direct things and stuff.
It's fascinating. It really, and I've seen it all. You know, I've watched this whole thing from there being more bikes than cars to now there being more cars than bikes. I mean, I've seen the whole evolution, and it really is fascinating. Yeah. And they have a lot to be proud of. And so
I think as a country, we need to pay real close attention, not just from a, you know, xenophobic hands-off type of thing, but pay attention to what's going on in China. And you know, it's a participation thing. It's not.
I agree. We should work together. We'll lose. We will lose.
Well, we lose because they set the rules, and we have a free society. That's the ironic side of having freedom.
I agree. And I love what you just said. You know, we have to work with them. Yeah. That's the only way this thing is gonna. And, you know, there are challenges because they're doing things like taking over the South China Sea, places where they shouldn't be. Right. So I think we have to pick our battles. Like ones like that are important.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know how they feel about Taiwan. If you even mention Taiwan as not being part of China, they go nuts.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. And so we have to watch what we say, but I think we have to find a way to, you know, work together because, you know, they're gonna
things, right?
It is the reality. So. Yeah.
I mean, look at Alibaba. It's probably bigger than Amazon at this point. It's the worldwide market.
If not, it's getting pretty damn close. And here's the fascinating thing. They are taking the best of everything. So they're a combination of like PayPal, eBay, Amazon. Then they're wrapping it all up in one sort of platform. Yeah. And going global. And it's they're making great progress. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that unfolds. I think right now they're going through some challenges right now in the country, as you can tell, but they'll get through this. They take the long view of everything.
The company based in China, Alibaba?
Yeah.
It is. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Hangzhou.
Got it. Okay. So we're back in like the early 90s now at this point. You're over in Taiwan?
Yep.
Okay.
And so studying Chinese, and then I ended up working in the bike industry to make some money. So after a year studying full time, like 12 hours a day, and traveling and sort of embracing the culture, I found some work in the bike industry. And at the time, Taiwan and China were where most bicycles came from. And that was a lot of fun. But then I came back to go to graduate school. and I studied marketing and got my master's in Chinese, and then went to work at General Mills. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I thought most entrepreneurs fail because they don't really understand marketing and sales.
That's a good point. They don't get any
And so,
experience, you know.
Yep. So General Mills and Procter & Gamble were probably the number 1 and 2 marketing companies where marketing really is the driver.
Sure.
One of the kids ahead of me in my marketing class at General Mills, is now the CEO. And so, you know, all the leaders come up through marketing. And so I was there a little over 4 years, and I developed a passion for product development. So although I was doing classical CPG marketing, you know, you learn to manage a team. I shot TV commercials, worked on Betty Crocker brand. But I found this love of product development because it really requires both the left and the right brain.
Yeah, of course.
You need the creative side. You know, what are consumers' beliefs, behaviors, needs, and wants, and how do you observe and understand those, and then but how do you translate that into a product that you can bring to market? And that requires sort of the other side of the brain. So after I did that, I then got sent to China.
Can I ask you a question? General Mills, you think I know they're very big, but
huge.
You think of like, cereals and things like that. What were they in? All kinds of food, but it was mostly food?
Oh, it was all food. So General Mills was, you think Wheaties or Cheerios.
Yeah, I mean, they started as a milling company and they made cereals.
Gold Medal flour was their flour. Betty Crocker, they own the whole Betty Crocker brand. That's where I started. But your kids probably ate fruit roll-ups. I sort of managed the fruit roll-ups brand. That was one of the brands that I had a chance to manage. And so Yoplait yogurt. So a really big food company, great training. I'm not sure, which companies are doing training these days, but we got great training. It was a strong culture of management. So you learn to manage people, you learn to run a cross-functional team. And that really set a foundation for me for, my business skills. And I'm grateful to General Mills for that. They really do a great job training and coaching and giving you the skills.
Right. Well, it was a smart move to go out and develop skills as opposed to just saying, I'm going to learn it while I do it.
Right. And, a lot of people are doing that, and that's great. But I really have a great appreciation for the skills that I've developed.
Right. Well, but there's a very high failure rate, and there's a reason for that. And a lot of it is because maybe they just don't know any better, but, they don't take the time to develop those skills and to use the fundamentals that everyone's using. There's not that many secrets. Right. But you got to follow the fundamentals.
That's right. I agree. And it's hard. It's really, really hard. So if you don't have the skills, and then equally important, if you don't have the network or understand how to get things done. So I would say by the time I left General Mills, before I moved on to my next role, it was really about leading a cross-functional team. Mm-hmm. Anything great, and the best work I've done is really through other people. And that's about compromise. It's about collaboration. It's about empathy. And you have to really understand those things. And I started to learn that when I was at General Mills, and then further developed that over time.
Now, can you explain for people listening what a cross-functional team is for people listening?
Sure. So let's take fruit roll-ups, for example, because that's a common product. So as I was running the business, I had to do things like forecast. The salespeople and manufacturing want to know how much we were going to make. If I wanted to launch a new product. So I launched the first fruit roll-up with 2 flavors and 2 colors.
Okay.
20 years later, it doesn't sound that sort of exciting, but back then, it hadn't been done. Right. And in order to do that, you had to get feedback from the consumers. So you had to have your market research get on board and understand what you were doing. Then you had to have someone in operations participate in this, right? Well, how do you make something with 2 flavors and 2 colors, right? There's an operational component to it, right? Then sales had to be involved. Can we sell something like this? Is it really that interesting? And then your finance people, well, what's it going to cost us? What kind of new equipment do we need? So when I say cross-functional team, it's how do you get all these people on the same page in the boat,
departments,
rowing in the same way. Now, the people in operations, here's a key learning for me. When we made the 2-color, 2-flavor product, it created extra waste. And without going into the complexities of operation, but in order to do this
in the manufacturing process.
Yes. So in order to do that, the first type that we made had a little bit extra waste. Well, guess what? The people in operations are evaluated on how little waste they make.
I'm sure, because if you and I are making fruit roll-ups out of our garage, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're making millions of units, it's huge.
Like half a penny is huge. And so they basically put the kibosh on this product that was the #1 scoring idea like in years.
Now you didn't develop it, right? It came out of an R&D department or did you?
Well, no. So I developed the concept, tested. So I wrote up a concept.
Okay.
We didn't have a physical product yet. And
Right.
people said, oh, I would love that. 2 flavors, 2 colors, and you could play this kind of games with it.
Okay.
So it scored really high. So the problem was you couldn't manufacture it. Like the team rejected it because it would create waste, which was against how they were compensated. And you
Right,
don't
it
mess
would
with
affect their
people's
comp. Yeah, right.
You don't mess with their comp.
Right.
And so this was one of my key lessons learned at
Right.
General Mills. So the interesting thing is, how could we had to figure out how to change the product
Right.
that didn't compromise the concept that we tested with
But solve the problem
with kids and moms,
Yeah.
yet had no waste.
Right.
And so we were able to do that. But this is an example of having to have empathy and understand, like,
Right. It's things you don't think of because you're not the operations guy. You're like, I remember I worked for Nabisco one summer. I was interning
right.
in high school, I guess, and I worked in the salvage department. Their job was to salvage.
Right.
And it wasn't just product. It was, they closed
Packaging.
down an office, packaging,
Yeah.
office furniture, whatever it was. All this stuff would get sent to this department.
Right.
And their job was to get as much money out of it as they could.
Right. And you can imagine, so here I am, the brand manager for Fruit Roll-Ups. By the way, my comp too is related to this as well, because part of my compensation was based on the profitability of the company.
Right.
So if there's 200 brand managers, we all needed to be thinking about what was happening in operations. So, when you're young, you don't think about it, but this is why cross-functional teams are really important. And I want to point to, there's a point of distinction. What I've learned is there's cross-functional teams within a large company. So as you can think about all the functions and working together to bring something to market, but also later in life, as I was leading teams, there's this idea of collaboration with others. So, we pioneered, for example, just to complement this, we pioneered work in creating playgrounds for children with special needs.
Okay.
And so in order to do that, I was working at Little Tikes, and we made the commercial playgrounds you see at parks and schools and at McDonald's. Well, in order to do that, we were a playground manufacturer. We didn't know anything about children with special needs. Like, what were their challenges, their physical challenges, like, or they're
just making it for the general population, for kids.
Correct. Or their cognitive challenges. But I reached out to our St. Louis Children's Hospital to speak to therapists to find out what cognitive challenges kids have, what physical challenges kids have. And we documented all this. And then, so they were a partner. Then we worked with a group called the Special School District of St. Louis, who educated the most severe kids, so kids in wheelchairs. And we built playgrounds there. And together, we created new components, because the holy grail in special needs playgrounds are creating inclusive playgrounds. So when you can have a child with special needs with a child with no special needs,
they can go to the same place, right?
And they can be together and interact. That's the holy grail. And so that's what we were able to do, but we would have never been able to do that. So we knew how to make playgrounds, but we needed to collaborate cross-functionally or cross-organizationally to bring all this knowledge to bear on creating these inclusive playgrounds to really change the way. And we pioneered that. That was back in 2004. And now they're everywhere. Yeah. You see them everywhere. And so we created products and designs that were inclusive in nature. So that's an example of this idea of empathy. And empathy is a strategic advantage, Mitch. I really believe that. And collaboration.
For sure. Huge.
Right.
Because
some people don't want to do it.
Well, people are stubborn, and they end up producing a product that is, not listening to the marketplace, and they fail. I mean, it's so look, the most successful people I know who are in your entrepreneurial space, smaller companies, whatever, it's because they listen to their customers, they ask their marketplace, and they continue to do that. It's not
It doesn't end.
It never ends, because people are changing. New people are coming into the marketplace. New people are leaving, and and if you're not attuned to that, you're in trouble. And I think it's funny. I think the right brain is what really affects. A lot of entrepreneurs are very creative. I'm creative too. You like to do all the shiny things and the new this and the new that and the packaging and check, but you're not doing the fundamentals you need to do to make sure that what you're doing is not a totally waste of time.
That's
going in the wrong direction. So, but your corporate experience is so valuable for that, because it's a different skill set.
That's
right?
right.
A lot of entrepreneurs start small companies. They have a lot of trouble scaling, become a large company because it's a
Right.
totally different skill. And then they need to go
That's
out and
right.
hire a CEO. Having those skills there's a lot to be said for that. So
Yeah. And, just building on what you just said, my experience is I'd rather execute a simple idea flawlessly
yeah,
than a complex idea in a mediocre way, because you live to survive another day, right?
absolutely.
And so I think, but some people just want to sort of do it all, and you can't. So you have to be really good at something and then sort of build on that. But
I mean, you
we're
didn't
all in
start
a
at
rush.
oomame and then come out with 27 SKUs and 14
No, we
different
started with
flavors. And,
2.
yeah,
We
of
had like
course.
6 that we wanted to start with, and then
Right,
we
but you
just
don't
said we're
jump
going to do
into that
2. We're
and
going to
get
do
good
2.
at it, right? And
Right.
perfect it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then
Okay,
learn,
good.
right?
This is all good stuff.
We
Yeah.
learned a ton of stuff, like working with a co-packer. We learned about branding. We first called it chili infusion, and quickly we learned we had to call it a chili crisp because no one really understood what a chili infusion was. So,
Right.
as
They
an
do it. They
example.
do it at the liquor level. Like if you
Yeah.
chili infused tequila, everybody knows what that is.
There you go.
Right.
So
But different marketplace.
that's right. So
Yeah.
I think that's a great example of leveraging that big company experience.
Yeah.
To avoid mistakes. I made some, but I was able to avoid probably quite a few because of my experience.
Somebody said to me recently, they're always happy to make the little mistakes because they learn from those and they're not as impactful on the business. It's avoiding the big ones
Right.
that really can get you,
Right. And I think you do have to make mistakes, but they're only mistakes if
They're growth experiences. Right?
yes, if you don't learn from them.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
so failure is only the opportunity to more intelligently begin again. Henry Ford said that.
Right,
And,
exactly. But if you're wrong about your product, for example, and you have a warehouse full of product because you didn't do it right, that's a big mistake.
Right.
Yeah, you get your first 2 SKUs and they're wrong. You could change them. You didn't order too much.
Totally agree. And it's interesting because we've been doing R&D on a new product line. We were in a pilot kitchen last week, and I've been really wrestling with like, what have I learned the last year, and how do I apply it to this new line? Because this line is going to be huge, and I'm really thinking about going slower. Really, just slowing down. Getting the testing done, and just trying to have patience, which no entrepreneurs have, but I think it's going to serve us really, really well. Just being slower.
Yeah.
So I'm really trying to embrace that.
Yeah, I think that's a learned skill. I think if you do that more, you get comfortable with it and you start doing things the right way and you see things that happen. Sometimes you're going so fast, you don't see.
Yeah. I can't afford that.
In the wrong direction.
I'm funding this myself.
Can.
Yeah.
Most people can. Even if you have funders, they're not.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't have no patience. You better be very careful. Right. That's even worse. Right.
Right.
I have to answer to my wife.
Yeah, well, that might
that's
be
hard
worse
enough.
Than having investors. Right? Exactly.
Well, it's not as bad as having investors, but I'm responsible to her and my family, right?
Of course.
So, it's fascinating to me the last 4 weeks, just slowing down on this process. I wanted to be out before the end of the year, but I'm thinking, January is plenty of time, and maybe even February. We're gonna get it. I want to get it right.
Now, you said you have a test kitchen, so you did that like kind of offsite or out of.
Using
your regular facilities.
Yeah, so Mitch, I ran a food company before doing this.
Got it.
And the one thing I learned is I don't want to run a food company. I don't want to worry, are the chilies coming in from Mexico?
Right.
And I don't know if I could say this on your show, but are married people on the third shift having sex, while on the clock? And by the way, they're not married to each other, right? I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, no, those are HR issues. There's no question about it.
And so this was a co-packer that has a commercial space where we would make this next product at. And so we literally went in, we ran, 100 pounds, and it was totally enlightening. So now we're going to be getting some feedback. We're working on the formulas. And, I could probably have something ready in 4 weeks, but that's just too fast. And so I'm just going to slow it down a little bit.
But they're the ones that are doing the testing for you, and then eventually.
No, I'm doing the testing. I'm literally in there.
Using their space.
Correct. Right. So I was in there using their equipment, and I will be there. Ultimately, they'll make this. I will be there for the first 10,000 pounds.
To make sure they get it right.
Well, I have to write the process. I have to write the procedure. I have to make sure FDA is signing off on it. So I take this very seriously. it has to be done right. And our products, as you know, every detail is important. Every particulate, every ingredient. And so here in this next case, because it's all about creating these amazing eating experiences for people, that's where we're at. And so this next product, every detail is important. And I just want to make sure that I document it, that I'm comfortable with the people there, but I will be there for the first however many runs it takes.
Right.
And so that's what we were doing last week. Actually, we ran it. They were just sort of helping. We ran all the equipment. We ran all the cooking, all the testing. So.
Got it. Okay. I know I'm jumping around and I'm getting ahead.
Yeah, that's okay.
So where were we? You were back. You were back at General Mills. You left General Mills.
Left General Mills. So then SC Johnson, which owns Raid, Glade, and Ziploc bags.
Yeah, that's the wax company. That's not the healthcare company.
Not the healthcare company.
Are they related to Johnson? Is it?
No,
no
not
relation.
At all. No relation. SC Johnson is a family-run business started by the grandfather and now run by one of the kids, grandkids.
But not related to the other Johnsons.
No. They wanted to set up 8 centers of innovation around the world because they weren't able to export innovation from North America to, say, India. And so they were very, very thoughtful because they're in lots of categories. They were very, very thoughtful. And so they created these centers of innovation in 1999. And they had, just as an example, like the UK was high-end toilet care.
Okay.
Argentina was low-end floor care. Philippines was low-end air care. France was high-end floor care, right? And China was low-end insect control. So think of mosquito control for 5 cents a day. And so they set these 8 centers of innovation around the world, and they had them all filled, but they couldn't find someone to lead this center of innovation in China because at the time, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but 21 years ago, there weren't a lot of Chinese people who understood innovation, how to lead innovation. And so they came and recruited me from General Mills to go open this center of innovation. But all of the other centers of innovation had someone from the local market.
These were research and development facilities, right?
They were really marketing driven, but I had a cross-functional team. So for example, on my team, I had a local technical, insect chemist kind of
or something, right?
From China, right?
Got it.
I had a marketing person from China and I had a market research person. And then I had an entomologist from the US who was on the team.
Okay.
Remember, back to cross-functional teams. You're
dealing with mosquitoes, right?
Mosquitoes, rodents, and roaches.
And did you know anything about them? No,
Nothing.
You're a marketing guy.
No.
You don't need to. You need to.
Well,
know
no,
how
you
to
actually
manage the
need
team.
to. It's funny that you say that, Mitch. You actually need to. And
you learned a lot about that stuff.
You have to learn about the biology because what you want to do is you want to eradicate them. So I moved.
That's probably the last thing you want to be doing, right? Your whole career. Now you're a biologist.
Oh, I loved it. No, but I mean, if you're
sort of fascinating, was it?
Fascinating. I mean, if you're an innovator, you got to dive into this stuff. So curiosity, we'll come back to this, but ask me about curiosity a little later because I think it's really important skill, and it's I think it's something that we all need in the future. Right. So anyway, I'm in China, set up the Center of Innovation. The cool thing was we did a kickoff with all 7 other leaders at headquarters in Racine, Wisconsin. So I got to meet them all. We all got to share. They didn't tell us how to do our jobs. We all got to share learning. They gave us some training. Although I had been leading innovation at new product development at General Mills, that I spoke Chinese and led new product development at General Mills, which is what made me an attractive candidate.
Got it. Right.
So I understood, the product development process, ideation, commercialization, development, launch. And so they had recruited me, but I got to meet these 7 other centers of innovation leaders. I'm still friends with half of them because they were really unique and interesting people. We got training and then we went to our respective countries. And I left with 2 young kids under 4 and a pregnant wife and moved to Shanghai. So that was an adventure, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. And the third was born in Hong Kong, when we were living there. And so we set up the Center of Innovation. They didn't tell us how to do our job. So we would communicate with the other leaders to say, what are you doing? How are you doing it? We would share learnings. I took my team. It all started with what are the beliefs, behaviors, needs, and wants. So we took the research we had, and then we went into more than 100 Chinese homes doing ethnographic work. So we would watch people, observe people, ask questions, and that helped us develop this really deep understanding of the Chinese consumer back in 1999. Now, we needed communist approval to go into every single house that we went into. Oh, yeah. I mean, it was really an interesting time. I'm not sure that's the case anymore, but, I was in upscale high rises in big cities, and then I was in remote villages where farmers lived on dirt floors, trying to understand, down in the Golden Triangle, like how do farmers deal with mosquitoes? And so it was fascinating to me, and a great insight I'll share with you, because this was fascinating to me. My third week on the job, we were in a home. We were talking to this older woman in an older home in Shanghai about roaches. And while we're sitting there, a roach jumps up on the table, runs across the table, and she just smashes it with her hand.
Roach?
And I'm thinking, roach, a cockroach.
Yeah,
and I'm thinking to myself, she really doesn't need a product. It
doesn't bother her, just boom.
Yeah, and I went back to my boss and I started to walk her, and I had seen a couple of things like this. And I said, I don't think mosquitoes is a problem. I said, I don't think the cockroach category is one where there's going to be a need right now. And she was pretty unhappy about that, because they had spent a lot of money to move me over there, and she didn't want me but this was the fact. I had data, a bunch of data points, not just this one, but after that one I was watching, and I was like, I don't think there's a need for this.
You mean they what was it, because they didn't have cockroaches, or it just didn't bother them?
Didn't bother them.
Yes, they weren't going to really invest in.
No, they weren't going to spend money on a product that, and this old one was like, and it turned out we stuck with the project, and we came up with some interesting ideas, and, younger people were less likely to do that, but it's just fascinating. But that's what you learn when you're observing. Right. And in people's homes and in the
United States, you see a couple of cockroaches in your house, you're going to bomb your house and leave for 3 days.
No, exactly. When I came back, I worked on rodents. I had a similar problem here. When I came back and worked on rodents, what we learned was, if your wife saw a mouse in the house, most probably she'd jump up on a chair and scream. Yeah. And then when she's done, she would get off this chair and call an exterminator. Right. If she didn't do that, she would go to the store. She would go to the store and she would be at the shelf, but she wouldn't know what to do, because there's poisons and there's
all
traps.
Kinds of stuff, right?
Right. And so, I was trying to recommend to leadership here back in the U.S. I'm like, we should spend money on educating at the shelf, because that's the point. That's the moment where people are like, what do I do? Right. The household penetration of rodents is so small, you would never TV advertise. And that was like heresy at a place like S.C. Johnson, because everything was TV advertising. And so, it's different than toilet paper, where, penetration's 99.99%, with rodents, it's low, and doing a TV commercial, really
you never see those, right? It's not worth it.
You wouldn't make sense. So anyway, you fight the good fight. I'm not sure I won that one.
It's funny. I think my wife once, in our older home, we had a mouse in the house. She calls me at work. What am I going to do? And then she traps this thing. I come home from work, and the thing's under in this little box, I guess. And there must have been 15 books on top of the box. I'm like, I don't think the mouse is that strong. I think.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
And then I lifted the box of the mouse, was standing there shaking, probably because it's terrified to death. Right. Put it in this little box, took it out to the woods or something, and I don't know whether it came back or not. But it was pretty funny relative to what you think you need to do with a.
That's the whole insight. That's the whole point. No matter what product or service you have, having those unique insights really allows you to create unique products, right?
Yeah, sure. But it's interesting how it varies. You don't think about it, but from culture to culture and situation to situation around the world, it's just something they live with. So they're not going to invest in money to kill things that doesn't bother them.
And that's why ethnographic work is so important, observing people in their space. Why do they do what they do? Cereals for breakfast, but when you watch people, they eat it after dinner as a dessert. Right. And, there's cognitive dissonance. They say, oh yeah, cereals for breakfast. A lot of cereals eaten at night. And so do we create a cereal for evening, for dessert, a dessert cereal?
Or they just eat the same cereal. Yeah, maybe.
Or they eat the same cereal. Do we create a dessert cereal specifically for the occasion? So it's fascinating. And then when we went back in China, and when we started to develop prototypes, in product development, you prototype for form,
Okay.
what does it look like and function? Like, how
Right.
does it work?
Right.
Right. And, we did that and we learned a ton, what was acceptable and not acceptable, with the one child policy, they wanted to make sure that there were no chemicals around for kids to hurt themselves with.
Ingest. Yeah. Right.
Right.
Burn themselves.
And so,
ingest.
you wouldn't learn that unless you're in the house giving them something that, they can react to. And so
Right.
we did more work, around prototyping with form and function. And, that's part of the development process, right? And again, curiosity, I think, is the key, to being successful and being willing,
I think it's I think if you're genuinely curious about what you're doing, I think it helps you avoid a lot of problems. I think you end up seeing things, discovering things, as opposed to being nervous
right.
and just worried all the time.
Right. But, Mitch, it's our greatest strengths are oftentimes our greatest weaknesses.
That's the irony of life, right?
And curiosity I've gotten my ass kicked.
Have you?
Totally. Well, I want to know everything. And I'll give you a great example. When my entomologist from the States was in China, we were out after a day of doing ethnographic work, and I was asking him about the biology of a rodent. Okay. And because rodents, for example, they travel along the walls because their hairs tell them where they are, and they memorize these complex limbic movements. It's like 25 steps to this corner, and then I make a right, and they memorize this stuff. And I'm asking this entomologist all these questions, and finally, we're in a street market late at night, and he looked at me and goes, "Why do you want to know all this stuff? Like, I'm going to be an entomologist." And I said, "Jim," I said, "I'm just curious." I said, "You're telling me, for example, that the hair lets them navigate." I said, what if we were able to get an air all over their body and they lost their hair? Would they be lost, going where the hell do I go? Right? I don't know how to navigate because I have no hair. Maybe that's a way so it's more of, I'm not trying to do your job. I'm trying to understand so we can create new ways to, manage this pest problem.
Yeah.
And when I explained that to him, he had this kind of sense of relief. We're still friends, right? But he said, "I've never had a marketing person ask me the questions that you have." And so it gets you in trouble. It's gotten me in lots of,
you made progress,
I did, but I wouldn't be where I am
least.
today.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't for curiosity, but there's a balance, right? In big companies, people, they don't always want to share, and that's part of the problem, right?
Yeah, sure.
I think.
Yeah,
but
totally.
you pointed it out earlier. It's really about collaboration, and you can't have enough eyes trying to solve today's problems. They're way too complicated.
Right.
And you really need diversity of thinking. If you and I worked on a project, your lens is so different than mine. I'm sure that it would be absolutely complementary to what I'm doing.
Of course, because
no doubt,
totally different than you. We have totally different experiences in life.
Exactly. I think great stuff would come out of it.
Yeah, that's what you ultimately want, but you can't always do that. So, how long were you at SC Johnson?
So I was there about 2 years.
Oh, only 2 years.
And then all of a sudden, a new president of Asia came in and said, "Asia for Asians," which is unfortunate because I had uprooted my whole family, and then we got sent back to Racine, Wisconsin. I was one of the
go back home.
Yeah. Well, it was expensive to have us on the ground there. We had a house in Shanghai with the driver. It was nice. It was
nice for 2 years, right?
Oh my God. It was like the life. It was so much fun. And it was such a dynamic time in Shanghai at the time. We put 2 of the kids in Chinese schools. They were the only white kids.
So they didn't go to one of these international schools? They went.
Well, no, they were 4 and 2, but I wanted them to get Chinese language.
Yeah.
And I have this crazy video on the last day of school of my son, who was 4 at the time, having a conversation in Chinese with the teacher. It's hysterical. He's lost a bunch of it. He's 24, but he studied Chinese in college, and so his Chinese is pretty good now. But he lost what he had.
Well, because when you're, they say under 5, right? You don't really remember much of anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But hysterical. I have it on video. It is the funniest. It is funny. She's asking him a question. He's like, "I'm getting on a plane," in Chinese. He goes, "I'm getting on a plane and going back to America." And she's like, "You're going to America? You're going to miss me?" He's like, "No." It's really funny. It's a funny video. So it's good to give that kid the experience.
Yeah. Well, now he can see that again because he doesn't remember it.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. So they threw you back to the United States. You landed in Racine.
Right.
That's Wisconsin, right? You said
that's Wisconsin. Yes.
Yeah. for the palm trees and the coconuts. That's why you went to Wisconsin.
Exactly. We were right on Lake Michigan, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And, we were there a year, but our family, my wife's family is from St. Louis. And so, the goal was really to get back here. But as I was looking, since I knew I was coming back and with the kids, we wanted to be near family. People here in St. Louis, when I was looking for jobs from Shanghai, they're like, well, when you get back to the country, let us know.
Right.
So, I had to move to Racine first, and then I ended up, finding work back down here. So.
And you're in St. Louis now?
We've been in St. Louis for 21 years now.
Oh,
so,
good. Okay.
And it's been a great place to raise family. There's been a significant amount of innovation here the last 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, it was pretty bland.
Yeah.
We made the best of it, and it's been a great experience, especially having grandparents and cousins. I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, no, of course. It's hard to be away from family for a long time.
It is. So it's been great. And so our kids got to know their family and their grandparents. And so we're very fortunate for that.
Very nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So you came back, you weren't with S.C. Johnson at that point, right?
I came back to Racine, but then I moved here that's where I worked for Little Tykes, the commercial side of the business.
That's where Little Tykes
Yep. So that was my Little Tykes experience.
Is that an independent company, or is it part of Play School, or?
It was part of Newell Rubbermaid at the time.
Okay.
And then Newell Rubbermaid sold off the commercial business and let them continue to use the name. And then the toy company stayed with Newell Rubbermaid. And I don't know who owns them now, but so it was my first experience really in what I would call management. So I sat on the team, we talk about a cross-functional team. So I headed up marketing and product development, and I sat on the team with operations and finance and R&D. And it was great because we were the decision makers for the business.
Got it.
That was exciting.
Got it. Okay, so you got to take us through. I want to see when you become an entrepreneur, when you get out.
You're
on your own. Good luck.
Yeah, I'll fast forward because there's a lot of stuff in between. But I would say, having worked for people my whole life, most recently I was helping run a Chinese food company. And just to give you an idea, we hand rolled 500,000 egg rolls a day.
So you sold wholesale to restaurants.
Yeah, so there's 45,000.
Well, they all look the same. They don't make their own egg rolls.
That's exactly right.
Right.
Yep. And actually, a driver of that, you talk about being asleep at the wheel. So, 20 years ago, lots of immigrants had come over from China and Hong Kong, opened up Chinese restaurants because that's what they
didn't
did.
know any better, right? Exactly.
That's right. And then what happens is they highly educated their kids. Highly educated. They believe that Chinese believe education is important, and they're not working in the restaurants. And so while they were growing up, they would make egg rolls. But when they got older, all these people who were, grandparents who were, come over too, all that didn't exist. And so this company filled the gap in that space. And 600,000 egg rolls a day we hand rolled. We made 1 million fortune cookies a day.
Yeah.
But what I learned was, I had worked with my business partner at the time, and our values were just not aligned. Okay. And that's okay. Yeah. And so it was time for me to do something more, on my own. Unfortunately, it was a toxic departure, not by any means for me, but without going into it, it was a toxic departure. And I'm like, I looked for work, and then I realized it's now or never. It's time to do it, because I would have waited a while, but I couldn't find work. So I said, I mapped out, you'll appreciate this. So my wife's a second grade teacher. Okay. I took a 20-foot long sheet of paper and I mapped out my career into phases, and then along the bottom. And then as I did that, I started to do some mind mapping about like, what's authentically me? What do I like? What experience, where can I add value? Right. What's authentic? And lots of themes came up, and, food for me is my love language. And there were two ideas, one which I was passionate about, but didn't have the experience and no credibility for. And then this idea for, a food company came up. And so I just started to go down that path, and I said, I would make a third of what I was making before. I'd be happy, and I could make it work to do my own thing.
Right.
And then not be beholden to a company or other people. So that's sort of how I ended up here. And it's been, we got our first pallet of product on March 20th, 2020.
Perfect.
So that was the
Just
day
in
that
time to not
everything
be able
shut
to sell
down.
anything. Yeah.
Everything shut down in St. Louis. And
Yeah.
the good news is we had set up an e-commerce site. So last year in 19, we did half our business e-commerce, half brick and mortar. This year it'll be 80-20 because we picked up a bunch of stores around the country that are carrying our products.
Yeah.
So that's where it began. You know, you think about a cross-functional team. When I started, I hired a chef. This chef had been my boss, believe it or not, in college. She was an investment banker at Merrill Lynch. And then she won University of Chicago MBA. She won a cooking contest to go study in France for a year.
Oh, okay.
And then she never went back to banking since then. And so that would have been, 1990. Since then, she's opened up restaurants in New York, done food styling for Pizza Hut. She did like the Today Show for years, all the food styling. Very, very talented professional chef. And I had hired her at General Mills a few times. So I called her up because she's a friend, and I gave her my rough formulas for at least Chinese and Mexican, and then she just did her magic. And then on her own, we decided to do Morocco and India, and she just created those out of thin air. Well, a lot of research.
Right, but she did all the recipes and
she did all. I mean, amazing. And so, cross-functional. So she's been involved since day one, and she's been a great partner because not only is she a chef, she's a business person. And so when we're talking about going to market, she can totally weigh in on those things as well.
Yeah. So now, jumping back a little bit, I like the exercise of laying out your. I mean, it was basically like kind of a business plan, strategic plan, and a lot of people don't realize that when you put a business plan together, sometimes the question is, should I be doing this? Is it something I want to do? Do I have the skills to do it? Can I get other people to help me do it? Will I enjoy like you said, you would take a third of what you were making if you were happy and enjoyed what you were doing. I think a lot of people don't explore that because from the outset, maybe it looks like it's something they want to do. Oh, I would love doing that. But then when they really learn about the intricacies of the business, the ins and outs, it's not what they think it is. It's not, glamorous or whatever their impression is of it. And it's a good exercise.
And I want to come back to that. You have to work through things like, I was folding boxes. I mean, I fold boxes now.
Yeah. I mean, you got to do what you got to do, right?
Right. But, this exercise, interestingly enough, at a highlight, there was a phase one, and that was just learning skills. And when I look back, I was like, okay, so I worked all these hours to build this core set of skills. So for example, Taiwan, I was there 3 years. On this document, I was able to think about this and write down what it is that I learned in Taiwan. And I developed a sense of a comfort with ambiguity because I landed in this country where I could say hello, goodbye, and excuse me.
Right.
And then my first 5 words were those food words, right?
Right, and that was
and so I had to observe at a much higher level than I ever had in order to ride a bus, in order to, rent an apartment, in order to just do things.
Right.
So I developed a keen sense of observation. I developed a sense of curiosity and trying to find out. And then I developed this I had strong work ethic, but I studied Chinese like 12 hours a day.
Right.
And so when I looked at my experience in Taiwan, it's this comfort with ambiguity, which is really important in product development, right? And then ability to embrace failure and learn from it. On this map, you'll see those are core skills that help me become who I am and what I enjoy.
Yeah, there's no question about it.
Yeah, and then phase 2 was getting more management skills, and then people leadership skills, and learning what I liked there. Right. And then I would sort of document, what's authentically me. I think about food. I think about curiosity. So I'm going to talk about curiosity for a moment.
Sure.
In running new product development, my biggest job ever was running new product development at a company called Express Scripts. Okay. And I was there. I came in to run product development.
Company. They're online medical.
Pharmacy benefit management. So just like you use your medical card to go see the doctor, you use this card to buy your drugs.
Got it.
And when I started there, we were 20 billion in revenue. And when I left, we were 100 billion. So pretty crazy when you think of the growth. Sure. I came in to run new product development. And what I quickly learned was I needed to build this team, both that reported to me, but also this cross-functional team. And in order to be success, I was able to realize that there were, 3 key traits that people had to have in order to be successful. One was curiosity, and I call it active curiosity, meaning you're not just curious, you look at something and then you will dig into it until you figure it out.
You're driven to learn about it.
To figure everything, right?
Right.
Service, and I define service as having empathy and being willing to collaborate.
Okay.
And then pride. You take pride in your work, so you're not going to hand me a piece of shit. Pride is,
Right.
This is something you're proud of.
Right.
And I learned how to interview for curiosity, service, and pride. And I didn't always get it right, but if I could find partners who embodied that, I knew they would be collaborative. I knew they would be empathetic.
Right.
I knew they would be curious, and I knew that we could work together to do amazing things.
Yeah.
And so I really refined that piece. And even to this day, I don't do well with people who don't exhibit those traits.
Right.
And I've had people on that one team. I remember this young lady, she had built this model, and I was asking her questions about a model that she said she had built. She had no answers.
Right.
And 2 weeks later,
she didn't build
left.
it.
No, well, who knows where it came
Right,
from,
you
but
don't know,
or she
right?
didn't understand it. 2 weeks later, she left and found another job because my questions were too intense for her, and they weren't meant to be mean or
Right.
derogatory. I just wanted to understand, because I would have had to go and explain her model to my boss, and if I
Right.
didn't understand it, and then challenge her to make it better, and I did it in a very respectful way. But some people they're not wired like that.
Yeah, well,
and that's okay.
that it's a huge shortcoming of people. People are generally, entrepreneurs, really bad at evaluating potential employees and partners and people that they're bringing into the business. And
Right.
I think I think he's a neuroscientist or whatever on my podcast, and he wrote a book called Never Go With Your Gut. And he did a study, and he's done a lot of studies on the fact that generally, when we don't have a process that we use to evaluate things, ultimately you're going to go with what you feel good about, but you have a baseline process that you use to evaluate these people because it fits with, and you have a process. So therefore your chances of failure or picking the wrong people, like you said, it's not that you always get it right, but your chances are much higher of getting the right people. Most people don't do that. They don't use a process and stick with their metrics. And they pick the wrong people, and they end up in business with people, with the employees who are maybe good people, but they're either in the wrong position or they shouldn't even be with the company. And there's a lot to be said for, the skills. I wanted to make a point too. There's two kinds of entrepreneurs in my mind. There's a general entrepreneur like you, and there's specific entrepreneurs, people that have figured out one business, one type of business, one way to do business, and they can't make the jump. So either that business changes and the industry changes and they have to pivot, or they sell the company and they want to start something new and they just can't do it. You and a lot of people that I've interviewed can be successful in almost anything that you seek out to do, because first of all, you'll weed out the ones that you won't be successful in. And the other ones, you have the skills to make these things happen. And those are the ones that are really successful in business and almost any kind of business, really.
No, I would agree. And, we're living in a world today which is changing so fast. I mean, COVID, we don't even understand the impact COVID's going to have on things. We really don't. I mean,
we jumped to 10 or 15 years in the way we do business all over the world already.
Totally agree. And we can't understand the implications of that. But if your eyes are open and you're paying attention to this, I think you can ride that wave. And, I read a report by Accenture that said the two biggest skill gaps in the future, it's $1 trillion gap in productivity and efficiency, is a lack of critical reasoning and empathy.
I'm not surprised.
And I think it's so true.
Yeah.
People don't think, and even though computers will do some of the thinking, you need to be able to, when you ask someone to do something, I don't want them to do it exactly like I'm asking them. I want them to use that as a guide and then go, if they run into a problem, I'll give you a really great example.
What makes us human beings?
Right. I asked someone to pack something a certain way, and they followed my thing to a T. And had they just looked at it, what was being asked of them was going to fail.
Did you do that purposefully?
No. So so here's the example. I asked somebody to pack a pallet with flavors, layered by flavors.
Okay.
Well, 3 layers didn't have enough product to make it into the pallet, so they put some cardboard down and made the next layer. Well, the whole thing caved in. I mean, which was obvious, right? When you looked at it, it wasn't a hard and fast rule. And someone who packs pallets for a living should have realized that you fill the layer out with the remaining a new flavor and then put another thing down. And I mean, that's just an example. And people just don't think.
Yeah.
They don't want to think. A lot of people
Maybe they
don't want to think.
Right. Maybe they don't
No, I
want
mean, it's you have to think in your job every day, but I mean, people, they just don't want to. They don't want to think. So you got to find the thinkers, and they're rare. It's like 7% of the population,
Yeah,
you
they're
know,
not problem
that are
solvers. They just, yeah.
exactly. That's that
Yeah.
critical reasoning.
Yeah. Look, I had a case yesterday. I have a client of mine who's selling a body shop. The
Right.
guy who's buying the body shop needs to get licensed through the DMV or whatever, because it's an auto body shop. He's been canceled by the DMV to get fingerprinting or whatever it is, like a bunch of times. We're supposed to close. He can't get this thing. The DMV is going to take like 8 weeks to do this. My guy wants to close. This buyer, I think, is living in the house on the property or going to live. So he's given up where he's living. So I get everybody on the phone. I go, listen, we have to solve this problem. So the guy from the SBA says, well, they're not going to loan the money unless he buys the business.
Sure.
So I go, well, let's get off the phone. I'm going to figure this out. So I call him back and I said, listen, this is what we're going to do. Your guy's going to move in. He's going to rent, and he's going to rent, pay my guy rent. He's going to run the company as it is now. And he's going to pay rent to be in the house. And then when we're done and you get the license, then we can finish the closing, transfer it over. Everybody's like, that's great. We're doing it. And, you know,
but no one else could do that.
Solve this. It was me. Yeah.
Right.
They're all screaming and yelling at each other. So
right.
I'm like, yelling at each other is not going to, let's figure this out.
Yeah.
My guy's not waiting 3 months to sell his business. He's going to find another buyer.
That's
Your
right.
guy now has no place to live. So,
right.
And
He's
now the guy's so excited. He's like, okay, let's move in. I'll move in Monday.
Right.
So,
and it's a multivariate thing, and people just,
right.
they don't, I don't know what it is, Mitch. I really don't understand it.
Lack of experience in critical thinking. They haven't developed. I wasn't that analytical before I went to law school. That was one of the reasons I went. I wasn't a good writer. I wasn't very analytical. I felt that I wanted to be more analytical, and law school was hard for me. It wasn't like I went to moot court and I was, wow, you know, it was hard because I didn't have those critical, but I definitely came out of there as a much more critical thinker than I was when I started.
That's great. I mean, because that's a great example that you just gave. I mean, I love that. And we, you know, no is not in my vocabulary, you know, and so with the fruit roll-ups, if I can't do this, I'm going to do something else. And there's lots of ways, around it. And we have to, and, you know, it's interesting. The hardest thing about being an entrepreneur, Mitch, I have the skills to do this. That's not the issue. Right. It's the emotional side.
Yeah.
And if I were to talk to,
right, you need a humbleness to not think
I'm humble.
Right all
it's
the
not,
time.
it's
no,
not
you. I'm just saying in general, the entrepreneurs.
It's like perseverance, for God's sakes. Everything,
you gotta like,
you know, you and I were supposed to do this 3 times, and it got moved, not by any, for whatever reason.
Both of us, I screwed up second time, whatever. I don't know.
I mean, my mango is stuck off a boat in California. I can't do anything about that.
Still stuck there, right in a port, sitting there.
Not anymore, but I mean, it was for way too long, and I got orders canceled, right? You know, so it's just perseverance, and it takes far longer. You know, you only hear about these success stories. Everything takes so much longer and costs more. And it's just a matter of having the perseverance. That's the difference between success and failure. It's just being able to wait it out.
No question about it. And I think people got to recognize life doesn't happen in a straight line.
Never.
You and I got to success. We didn't get there from here to there. It just didn't happen that way.
It is.
So if you take it, if you expect it to be difficult, right? You know something's going to happen. You just don't know what it is. When it does, not such an event. You know, you're like, okay, the boat's stuck out in the port in California. Everyone else is dealing with this thing. We might lose some orders. We're not going out of business. Let's figure out how to solve the problem.
Yeah. And, you know, I believe that everything happens for a reason. And so, you know, when that stuff got stuck, I literally stopped making sales calls for 3 months, and I pivoted my attention to this new product line. I wouldn't have done that had that not been the case.
Right.
And so it's, you know, you got to just keep busy and keep sort of pushing forward. But that's been the hardest part for me. It's been
and I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the evolution of the product.
Right.
I actually, while we're videoing, I think I pulled up, let me think. I think I pulled it up on your website, but maybe you could tell us about, let's see. Can you see that?
Not yet. It says your start. Oh, there you go. I see that. Yep.
Right. Yeah. So these are the 4 main products, right?
Yes, they are.
Yeah. Very good. So maybe you could
tell us
about, right. And I could talk right about it because you sent me a sample box or something?
Yeah, sample box.
And I've been using it on, you know, beans and rice, and I've been using it on meats, and I've been using all kinds of different kinds of stuff. So maybe you could tell us about the evolution of these things.
Sure. So we started with the first 2 on the left. So the Chinese chili crisp and the Mexican chili crisp. Now, the best way to describe our biggest challenges, we're pioneering a new category of condiments. And so what is it and how do you use it? And so if you think about going to a Chinese restaurant and there on the table is oftentimes a jar of oil with chilies in it. Well, what we tried to do is we tried to take that to the next level. And just for clarity, umami, what the name of our brand is the phonetic spelling of the Japanese word umami, U-M-A-M-I, and it means the fifth taste. Think of it as the conductor in an orchestra. It takes sweet, sour, salty, and bitter and elevates it to a whole new level. So it makes your mouth explode with flavor.
Got it.
And so, you know, the one on the left, the Chinese chili crisp, has flavors from Szechuan. And, you know, really that's where it all started. This is the gateway chili crisp. So if you think crispy chilies, there's peanuts in it, there's fermented black beans, which is where we get our umami, but then there's these mala peppercorns, which have like this tingly flavor to it. So it's the simplest of our chili crisps, but what people love is the organoleptic properties. And what that means is, what does it taste like and what's the experience in your mouth? So we say crispy, crunchy, chewy, and that's what we want to do. Our jars are 80% solids, but then we said, how do we take this platform, this crispy, crunchy, chewy concept, and bring it to these other, our favorite culinary hotspots? So in the case of the second one, the blue one from Oaxaca, Mexico, this is where we looked at the flavors that are relevant there. So in celebrating these flavors, not copying it because this doesn't exist in Mexico, we said Oaxaca is known for their chilies. So this is a blend of 4 Mexican chilies: ancho, guajillo, pasilla, and chipotle. So it's a little smoky, but we then take whole cumin and coriander seeds. And when you bump into one of these, you get this burst of cumin or coriander. But my favorite is when you stumble on an orange peel, because it gives this burst of citrus. And then there's pumpkin seeds. And then the palate is cleansed when you bump into a chunk of mango.
And the chef that works with you, or is your partner, or whatever her role is, she developed the recipes for these things.
Yes, she did. So, but, you know, I guided a lot of the requirements about crispy, crunchy, chewy. Every particulate is carefully negotiated over. And so what you get is this adventure in every bite. So one bite might have a thing of cumin in it, another might have a coriander, and then the next one might have mango. There's also pumpkin seeds. So again, crispy chilies, crunchy nuts and seeds, and something sweet. They all have that in common.
Now, what made you go into creating I guess, for the lack of a better term, a condiment, right?
Yeah. So as a foodie, I was making these products in my own home, something similar to it, because they simplify cooking. So instead of having to make a mole flavored sauce each time, there's 18 different ingredients in each of these. And so instead of having to assemble them and make them, I'd make them and then they'd last me weeks in the fridge. And I could easily, I did all the cooking in my family. I could easily whip up amazing fried rice or an amazing, chili relleno, with quinoa.
So you were doing this really in your own world.
Right. For Chinese and Mexican. And then, we said, well, how do we bring these amazing flavors, from these other places,
right.
From around the world to these other countries. And, this is where, Morocco and India are really fascinating. So if you've never been to the Medina and Fez, the Moroccan one all the way to the right, this is my favorite right now. I mean, it's got Berber spices, it's got chilies, but then it's got a hint of cinnamon and nutmeg. I mean, it is an almonds.
Pigs are big in that part of the world, right?
They are. And, and it's a little bit more rustic and bigger pieces, which is a nod to the nomadic lifestyle of the Berbers. I mean, it is very authentic tasting because the flavors are authentic.
Yeah.
But, you take a tablespoon of that and put it on top of couscous and you're in a new place, or put it on top of roasted vegetables.
Yeah, they're all great stuff. And they're all different. They all have a little bit of a different
they're completely different.
And how they affect the foods. Here, let me while you're
but
talking.
they're all about an explosion of spicy umami.
Yeah.
And they're all about and you only need a little bit, and they're all about crispy chilies, crunchy nuts and seeds, and something sweet. So it's this textural thing that most people don't do.
Way. I've learned that.
A little goes a long way. And, on top of avocado toast, they're all great. Or you can mix them all with mayonnaise for like a chicken salad, or on top of a burger,
Right.
You have a favorite use that you like, Mitch?
Yeah, I make this like rice and beans dish with avocado and tomatoes and sometimes grilled chicken, whatever. And I usually put some hot sauce on there, whatever. So what I did was I would take a tablespoon, like maybe half a tablespoon of whatever I wanted to do, whether it's Chinese or Moroccan or whatever. And I put it in there to mix it in, and it just like enhances the flavor.
Right.
It also adds some crunchiness or whatever to it.
Right.
Yeah.
And color. And so, you can be
But I've used it on burgers. I've used it on avocado toast. I've used it on different things.
It's very versatile. So, we just, I just want to feed people. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to feed people great tasting food. And, we make it easy. So instead of having to go buy 18 ingredients of which some you use and some you won't, you just get a jar of this and that's our goal. And, what's interesting, our products are vegan. And this next product line, I'll just tease it out a little bit, is our goal, our mission is to make plant-based eating craveable for everyone.
Well, that's some of these goals of like Impossible Burger, whatever. They're not going to get vegan people to eat Impossible Burgers. They want to get meat-eating people.
That's right. And that's what we want to do, right? So I love meat. I want to eat meat all the time, but I want to eat meat one day less a week.
Yeah.
Both for my health and, for the planet. So we're going to be launching an interesting product. It's a shredded product. And it gives an amazing eating experience, and true to umami, it will have umami embedded in it, and it will be flavors from around the world.
Great.
So we're looking like at a Cuban mojo and a barbacoa, and we want to make it no compromise. And it's different. Impossible and everyone else is doing ground or sausage. These are shreds.
Got it.
So it's like a shredded product. And
so it's a replacement. It's a meat replacement, basically. Meat substitute. It's not meat.
It's not meat.
Right.
It will rival meat. It will rival the meat eating experience. Almost, I've done research. Almost all the companies talk about meat. We're not going to talk about meat. We're just going to rival the meat experience. And so we're working on the marketing, but it'll be under the Umami brand.
All right. Well, we're going to put links in the show notes for the Umami, because I know it's not available all over the country in every place, right? But you can buy it online. Shipped to you. Yep. We'd love to send you some online. Okay. And so we'll put all those links in the show notes, but if you could also come back to me when you're launching the new product, we can maybe send out an email to our listeners and say, hey, the product we talked about on the podcast is now available, because this still be 60 some odd days before this comes out anyway.
Oh, yep. Perfect.
And then maybe we're closer to having it come out. We can put a link out.
Well, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we have a way that we may be going to market. Remember, it's all about how do you go to market, where people might be able to even get some of this. So depending on how things unfold. So
so when this comes out, it may be available, right?
It may be available via e-commerce, possibly. So,
all right,
Mitch, I'm so glad that we've got to connect.
Yeah,
I really appreciate
I love your story. I love your product.
Yeah.
I love flavorful, things. And my daughter, who's a big foodie, she loves the stuff too. And she's now in college. She's taking it with her. So
awesome.
It's all great stuff. So
and they make great gifts for the holidays. So
yeah, perfect. And you still have that sampler pack, right? So you can order it.
Yep.
You get 4 of them in a box. And
we do. And I just launched an adventure pack, which is a case. And it's much more affordable to buy a case, and then so you can give it out as holiday gifts. So we just launched that 2 days ago. We've already seen a bunch of sales for them. So
perfect.
We make it easy. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Have a great weekend.
All right. Be well.